There's a sentence some people say so often it stops sounding like an apology and starts sounding like a reflex. Sorry, said when someone else bumps into them, said before asking a question, said for taking up space, for needing something, for existing slightly too loudly in a room. You might do this. Maybe you've caught yourself apologizing for the weather, for someone else's bad mood, for a delay you had nothing to do with, for simply being in the way of something that was never really about you at all. It feels polite, considerate even. But underneath it, something else is happening. Something that has very little to do with manners, and a lot to do with how you learned a long time ago to keep yourself safe. Picture someone standing in line at a coffee shop. The barista calls the wrong name, hands the wrong drink to the person ahead, and there's a small mix-up. Nothing serious, the kind of thing that gets sorted out in 20 seconds. And in that 20 seconds, this person says it. Sorry. Sorry. I think that might be mine. Sorry. 3 times for a drink they ordered correctly, in a line they stood impatiently, for a mistake that belonged entirely to someone else. Watch their shoulders while they say it, slightly pulled in like they're trying to take up less room in the air around them. Watch their eyes, which go to the barista's face first, checking, not for the drink, but for irritation, making sure no one's annoyed, making sure, before anything else, that the moment passes without anyone feeling anything uncomfortable because of them. They get their coffee. They say, "Thank you. Sorry, thanks," on the way out. And they don't think about it again. Because to them, this wasn't strange. This was just Tuesday. That reflex didn't start at the coffee shop. It started somewhere much earlier, in rooms where someone's mood was the weather everyone else had to track. For some, it began in a household where one person's anger or sadness set the tone for everyone, where kids learned to read a parent's face before they read a clock, and where the fastest way to keep peace was to take the blame before blame even got assigned. Apologizing first wasn't really about fault. It was about control, about being the one to diffuse a situation before it had the chance to escalate. For others, it came from being on the receiving end of criticism so often that they started pre-apologizing as armor. If you say sorry before anyone points out what's wrong, it softens the blow. It signals, "I already know, please don't say it." Over time, this becomes less a sentence and more a shield, held up reflexively before there's even a sword in the room. There's a quieter version too. Some people learned that their needs were an inconvenience, that wanting things, having feelings, taking up time or attention came with a cost to people around them. So, sorry becomes the toll paid just for being present. Not because they did something wrong, because they were taught somewhere along the way that simply being there required an apology of its own. Picture a meeting room instead. Someone's 2 minutes late because their previous call ran over, completely outside their control. They walk in, sit down quietly, and the first thing out of their mouth, before anyone's even looked up, is, "Sorry, sorry. I know I'm late. Sorry." No one was upset. No one had even noticed. Later in that same meeting, someone else's project hits a snag. A vendor missed a deadline, a system went down, something nobody at the table had any part in. And this person, who had nothing to do with any of it, says quietly, almost under their breath, "Sorry. This is such a mess." Not, "This is frustrating." Not, "What's our next step?" Sorry, as if the chaos itself were somehow theirs to own simply because they were sitting close enough to it. By the end of the meeting, they've apologized 4 times for things that were never within 100 feet of their responsibility, and not one person in that room asked them to. This pattern rarely looks dramatic. It looks almost invisible, which is exactly why it's so easy to live inside without noticing. It looks like apologizing for asking a question in class or in a meeting, prefacing a perfectly reasonable thing to ask with, "Sorry, this might be a dumb question," before anyone's had the chance to think it is. It looks like saying sorry to a piece of furniture you bump into or to a stranger who steps on your foot, the apology leaving your mouth before you've even registered whose fault it actually was. It looks like over-explaining a simple "no," turning a complete sentence into 3 paragraphs of justification, as if saying no on its own were an offense that needs defending. It looks like flinching slightly when someone seems even a little off, scanning your last few sentences for what you might have done, even when their mood has nothing to do with you. They're tired, they're stressed about something else entirely. And still, your mind goes there first. It can also look like apologizing for your own emotions in real time, saying, "Sorry, I don't know why I'm crying," or "Sorry, ignore me," in the middle of a feeling that's completely valid, as if the feeling itself were an imposition on whoever happens to be in the room with you. Here's the strange cost of apologizing for things that aren't your fault. The people around you slowly stop being able to tell when you actually mean it. Picture a friendship where this happens constantly. One person genuinely does something wrong, finally, and offers a real apology, but it sounds exactly like all the other ones. Same tone, same quick cadence, same sorry that's been attached to spilled coffee and late trains and other people's bad days for years. The weight is gone. Not because they don't mean it this time, but because the word itself got worn smooth from overuse. And nobody can tell the difference between an apology that matters and one that's just reflex. There's a cost to how you're seen too. Constantly apologizing for things outside your control can quietly train the people around you to see you as the source of friction, even when you're not. Over time, some people start half believing it themselves, taking on responsibility for moods, mistakes, and outcomes that were never theirs to carry, simply because they've gotten so used to picking them up. And there's a cost underneath all of it, harder to see from the outside, a slow erosion of your own sense of where you end and other people's problems begin. When you spend years treating other people's discomfort as your job to manage, you can lose track of which feelings in a room are actually yours. The goal isn't to stop apologizing altogether. Real apologies given when they're actually owed matter. They repair things. The goal is narrower than that. Learning to notice the moment sorry wants to come out automatically and pausing just long enough to ask whether it belongs to you at all. It starts with a small private question in moments like this. Did I actually do something here? Or am I just uncomfortable that something happened nearby? That distinction between guilt and discomfort is often where the reflex loses its grip. Picture trying it once in a low-stakes version of that same coffee shop. The barista makes a small mistake, and instead of sorry, you simply say, "Oh, I think this one's actually mine." Calm, factual, no apology attached. No drama follows. The world doesn't tip over. The barista swaps the cups, says no problem, and that's the end of it. That's the quiet proof this whole pattern needs to unlearn, that taking up appropriate space, stating a fact, asking a question, having a feeling, doesn't require an apology to make it acceptable. You're allowed to exist in a room without first softening the edges of your presence. And maybe the most important thing to understand is this. Apologizing for things that weren't your fault was never proof that you were considerate. It was proof that somewhere along the way, you learned your presence needed defending. You don't have to keep paying a toll for being here. You were always allowed in the room.